Hello and welcome to another Animation Notes in Blender 2.80 tutorial. In this video you will learn how to create this Sci-Fi 3D laser printer effect. So let's get started! Alright, here I am in Blender 2.80 Release Candidate 2. And first, I'm just going to delete everything. So for this effect, we're going to basically need three different steps. The first step is that sort of 3D printer build-up animation. So let's get a model in. Of course, we're going to use Suzanne for this. Maybe add a subdivision to apply it so that we have a little bit more detail. And then I add a cube, go into edit mode and scale it up so that the monkey is completely inside the cube. Right, now I go into front view, but since I'm working on a laptop at the moment and I don't have a numpad on the keyboard, I have to use these menus here, which is a little bit awkward. And also over here I'm going to switch the visibility of this cube, the viewport display to, let's take wire. So we have this, okay? Okay, now I move this cube, G, C, up, or you know what, I'm going to move it down, maybe that's a little bit more logical to be underneath the monkey. And then I'm going to select the monkey, add a modifier, Boolean, I select intersect with the cube, and now when I move the cube up, I get this sort of 3D printer effect of this build-up animation. So all I have to do now is animate this. Let's say we do 150 frames in our animation. At frame 1, on the location, I hover over here, hit I on the keyboard to insert the keyframe, and then at the end, I'm gonna go GC all the way up to there, so that the monkey is completely printed at 150 frames. Hover over here, hit I again, and we get this animation, okay, which looks like this in 3D. Already looking pretty cool, but I don't want this ease in and ease out on the animation, so I go over here, switch this to the graph editor, and here we can see that we have this easing effect. So you select everything A and then T, linear, and then we don't have this easing anymore, so it just has the same speed to print our 3D monkey. Also, we notice something around here. See how the Boolean modifier creates this mesh on top? It closes off the monkey head that it cuts into, but then over here we don't have this top, and that is because Suzanne actually doesn't have manifold mesh, and that is because the eyeballs on Suzanne are separate objects. So I can go into edit mode and then hover over the eyeball and hit L, and then over here too. And for now, because this tutorial is not about mesh creation, you know what, I'm just gonna add a face here and add a face here. Now this looks weird, but you can see that now we have a manifold mesh and we don't have any parts where we don't get the top surface here. Right, cool. So basically that is already done. We have the 3D printing effect finished. Now for the second step, or for the lasers, we're gonna need some random spots on this surface. And as you can see here, we can't just animate a circle or something. We want this surface that we can see on top here. And we want this shape, and we want random spots on this shape. And when we're down here, we want the random spots on this shape. So how do we do that? Well, the Boolean modifier doesn't give us any option or doesn't tell us where it creates this top face. But of course there's an easy solution for that as well. So maybe I just go to the middle here. I select the monkey and Alt-D it to copy it and hit escape to keep it in the same location. I didn't use Shift-D because I don't need a separate mesh. I just want the same mesh. So I can still go into Suzanne and edit the mesh, maybe do some sculpting or something. And Suzanne 1 here is only linked to the same mesh. So I'm using the same mesh. Okay. Now I can hide Suzanne, my original Suzanne, and just work with this one. I also Shift-D this cube and then go into edit mode and scale down my cube 1 on the Z-axis to get this very thin layer. Okay, and I'm going to move this very thin layer in front view in edit mode up to about here. So this here is my first cube, and now this is the cube 1, my second cube, and I have it up here, which creates this kind of animation because I copied it, it's already animated and it's on top of the first cube. Now if I go to this second Suzanne copy here and select the second cube, all I get is this slice. Okay? Well, this looks like some sort of medical 3D animation thing. We get this slice, which is just the top layer of our 3D print. So if I enable the first Suzanne tool, we get the 3D print and the slice on top. Now we're going to be hiding this because it doesn't look very nice, but we use this slice, the Suzanne 1 slice here now, to go into a particle, the particle settings, create a new particle system, and with that we can now create some random spots on this top surface. So for 150 frames, 1000 particles is actually a good number, but we only need frame start 1, frame end 150, and we set the lifetime to be 1. Okay. Now for the source, we use the volume and we set it to random. Well, that's cool. And then for the velocity, I set it to 0. I don't want the particles to be moving around at all. I just want them to show up for 1 frame and then disappear again. Oh, here I forgot a setting. We also want to use the modifier stack because we have that Boolean operation on here, and our particle system should use the modifier stack so that we get the particles only in this top slice. Okay, so it looks like this. Okay, which is already pretty cool. So those are going to be our random spots on the top surface where our Sci-Fi 3D laser printer is going to have the laser beams go to. Okay, so that is done. Now I can actually hide this because I'm only going to use the particle system and show this. And I'm going to use the particle system inside of animation nodes because we're going to create the lasers now using animation nodes. Okay, so here I have a new node tree. First of all, I want the particle information, the location of the particles. So I take a particle system from object. Let's take this Suzanne here, so Suzanne 1. Then get the particle data from that. And here we have a list of vectors. And these are the spots, those random spots on the surface. So now how do I create a laser? I need to create a curve, a very simple curve that goes from one spot, maybe up here, and then to that particle, and then again from up here to another particle. So on each frame we have multiple particles visible, right? So this is randomly distributed over the course of those 150 frames. The particle system emits 1000 particles, so we get multiple particles per frame. So now let's create the laser. First, I'm going to create a subprogram loop, and then hit W, create invoke node, because we're going to plug those locations in here. So we need a new iterator of a vector list. We can plug that in here. Now inside of this loop, the output here is a single vector. So this loop gets called for each of those spots here, each of those particle locations. And we have to create a spline, create from points, and we can set that to poly, and this needs a list of points. So inside of this loop we're gonna create a list of points. Okay, so create a list, create a vector list. So for the first input I'm gonna set my location from where the laser comes from. So maybe on the C-axis 2, and then the second point is the point of the particle. So now basically they have 2 points in this list, 2 vectors. One is up here and the other one is one of those particles. And now for the tricky part, of course I want to have also multiple lasers here coming from up here to all of these particles. So basically I have to pipe this list back into this loop and just add all the other laser beams to this list. So how do we do that? Well, we can go to this node, our loop node, go to node and advanced settings, and then we create a new parameter, which is also going to be a vector list, because we're going to pipe this vector list back into this one here, basically. And we do that by selecting this loop input and clicking the reassign for the vector list, which gives us this node. So once you click that button, you have to move the mouse over here to get this node, and we plug it in here, which means our list with 2 vectors now gets reassigned to vector list to this input. So now for the next iteration, for the second particle on this frame, we already have a list of 2 vectors here, and we can add our next laser beam, our second laser beam, to that list by combining a vector list, this vector list with this vector list. So we're basically adding all of the laser beams to this list, and then when we're done, we also want this vector list parameter here to be an output of our subprogram. So here we have all of the laser beams, and we create a poly spline from it. And we need to also add a spline object output, enable the spline button, maybe create a new object which is now called target. We can call it lasers. So these are our lasers. You can already see we have the lasers here. So we created a single object that contains all of the laser beams now. And on the next frame, every time the frame changes, this animation nodes tree here gets executed, and we get new laser beams. And now all that's basically left is, again, I can hide this top layer here because that doesn't look good. We only need the locations to create this laser beam spline. And now really all that's left to do is maybe create some materials. So let's add a point light somewhere in the scene. Shift D, just light up this scene a little bit. Set the world to be black. Turn up the intensity on those lights, just so that we get something interesting looking. And then for the laser beams, which is this lasers object, so simple curve object, needs to have a little bit of a bevel depth so we can actually see the laser beams. And then it also needs a new material, set to emission, maybe make it red, or actually make it red like so, 100% red, and set the emission strength to something like 50 or even 100. And then of course in Eevee we have to switch on the bloom effect, and then we get these nice laser-like lines here. And of course with an animation we get this. So all that's left now is to render this out, and that's pretty much it. Of course you can go back in here, tweak some things, you can change the color of the laser beams, you can do multiple laser sources, you can move the laser source, because this here now is the laser source. So you can see here I can change where it comes from. I could also animate this, maybe use an empty and then plug the empty location in here and animate the empty, and all sorts of things like that. Alright, so if you decide to use this little trick to create this sci-fi laser 3D printer effect, please post a link in the comments below. I would love to see what you can come up with. I hope you learned something, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If so, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, check out all the other animation notes on here. Thanks for watching, Chris P out.